going across the whole length of the sukkah or the whole width of a sukkah, you left a space of 3 tfachim, approximately 9 to 12 inches wide of open space. So imagine if this is the wall of a sukkah, and here is the other wall, and here is the schach. So what we do is we put schach, we cover the whole area. But instead of putting schach the whole area, he left an empty space between the schach and the wall, and this empty space wide was the size of 9 to 12 inches, and this empty space went all across from this end to that end. So you have here three tfachim, 9 to 12 inches of empty space going all across. So what the Mishnah stated, if you leave such a space that they weren't careful, and sometimes it could happen that it could be very windy, and the wind could blow some of the schach off the top, off the walls, off the top of the walls, and then moves the schach off. And now you have that space between. If that space runs all along that wall from one end to the other, that separates the wall, this wall, from the schach that's over here. It creates a disconnect. This amount of space means that it's not connected anymore. If you would have a space less than 3 tfachim, less than 9 to 12 inches, so we say there's a rule, less than 3 is as if it's attached. It's called lavud. There's less than 3 between, here's the schach, here's the wall, it's less than 3. We look at less than 3 as insignificant. And it's as if it's closed, as if the schach reached over here. But since it's 3 tfachim, since it's a size which is considered a significant amount of size, 9 to 12 inches, so now what this does, it separates the wall from the schach, and now it's as if you have no longer a wall on the side. So now, depending on what your original size of the sukkah, of how you made the sukkah, would define for you if this sukkah is kosher. If the sukkah was made only with 3 walls, a wall over here, opposite wall over here, and a wall in the back, and totally open in the front. So I started with 3 walls, but now I lost the wall on the deal because of that space. I'm left with 2 walls, wall here and a wall here. 2 walls doesn't do the trick. Therefore, that sukkah is invalid.
Where's the space, Rabbi? Where's the space?
The space is, let's say the space is, here's wall number 1, morning Adam, wall number 2, and wall number 3 in the back, right? Make believe you're walking into the shul, and make believe the shul is the sukkah, and the entrance to the shul is totally open on that side, so there's no wall there, but I have a wall on my right and a wall on my left and a wall all the way in the back on the western side. So and let's say if this is the wall on my right, and right next to this wall, here's the wall, and I have the empty space adjacent to the wall, and with a width of 9 to 12 inches, that means it's empty from here to here, going all across, all the length of that sukkah. All adjacent to the wall, I have an empty space with a certain width. So that's a chunk. It's a nice chunk. It goes all the way across the sukkah. So now, is that clear, Taimi, how I'm showing it, or it's not clear?
Yes. Yes.
So now, and that's going to disconnect the wall to the schach. The schach is here. The schach.
So that renders that wall invalid. So now you're down to 2 walls.
Right, and that makes it not a kosher sukkah. But thank God, we commonly make 4 walls for a sukkah. We don't usually use it because anyways, practically in the climates that we're in, you can imagine if you're in a very hot climate, you might want to just have 3 walls and maybe leave that wall open. That doesn't bother you, or whatever the situation is. But in our climates where we're happy to have a 4th wall, sometimes it gets cold. So that 4th wall really serves a very great purpose. We don't want any open wall because then it can get really cold. So if we have a 4-wall sukkah, so that will only knock out this wall, and you're still left with 3 walls. I got a wall left here, a wall left here, and a wall left here. But it would be now we will have to look more in the halacha regarding, it would be that this space, it would seem to me that your sukkah in that case would start, you only could eat underneath this area of the schach. If you're left with 3 walls, because you started with 4 walls, then I would say, again, I would have to look more to halacha, then you're kosher starting under your schach. But the space between here would not be good. You would not be able to eat under that space. So therefore, if the schach is off, if it got windy and the schach came off on one side, which usually a lot of times it happens, right? If the schach moves, it can move off one side, but it's still leaning on 3 sides. But if it would come off on multiple sides, the schach, and you look and you see you have that space, and that other side on the western side adjacent, the whole schach came off on that side as well, and it came off 9 to 12 inches. Then you lost that side, and you might have lost 2 walls. Then you're stuck. So therefore, it's important to look up at the schach to see, is the schach, how well the schach is on. That was one issue that the Mishnah mentioned. The second issue that the Mishnah mentioned was if a person places invalid schach on top of his sukkah. He didn't know the laws properly. He might not have realized, and he had a space, and he used material that was not kosher for schach. Let's say he used metal, right? Metal is something that didn't grow from the ground, so that's invalid material. And now, in order for that invalid material to invalidate a sukkah, we say if that invalid material, it also depends on the size of that invalid material, but the size to invalidate a sukkah for invalid material is 4 tfachim. It's a larger size than the airspace. Empty space, 3 tfachim, 9 to 12 inches. But when it comes to not kosher schach, it's 4 tfachim. 4 tfachim is 12 to 16 inches of not kosher schach. If you have not kosher schach, the same case that we gave before, you have 3 walls, and you would have, let's say in the center of the sukkah, you have in the center of the sukkah, you have running across the whole sukkah, not kosher schach. I'm going to explain why I didn't talk about adjacent to the wall. I said it's in the middle of the sukkah. In the middle of the sukkah, you have this area of 12 to 16 inches of not kosher schach. So imagine, make believe, this is the middle of the sukkah, and this whole middle of the sukkah, let's make believe this is wide, 12 to 16 inches, goes across the whole sukkah, a piece of schach, a piece of material that is not kosher for schach. Let's say, for instance, it should be like the case we spoke about earlier. If you have a 4 tefach board, let's say, that might be a good example that we had. Let's say you have a certain board that's too wide, or you have not kosher schach that's taking up 4 tefachim. 4 tefachim of it's wide of not kosher schach. What that does is the same thing. It splits the sukkah in half. That not kosher schach makes it that this side of the sukkah and that side of the sukkah no longer connect to each other. It creates a separation, and therefore, if it creates a separation, so now I have like 2 different structures over here. I have this structure and that structure. They're not connected. If they're not connected, so then if I started with 3 walls, so I'm back to the same problem, right, Adam? I have left on this side 2 walls, and I have left on this side 2 walls, because this not kosher schach in the middle splits the sukkah in half into 2. So it's as if I have 2 sukkah. And the problem is, each sukkah here is only 2 walls. Because if you go across the center of a sukkah and you split the sukkah in half, what do you have left? You have like, what kind of letter you have left? Like you have like an L left on each side, right? An upside down L, right? You have left this, if you only start with 3 walls. Good morning, Simon. So I'm going to show you I'm going to display it with my fingers like this. If you split the sukkah in half and you only had 3 walls to begin with, so what you're left with is going this way, a wall, and you're left with going this way, a wall. And you so that's only two walls. You're left with only two walls on each side. And two walls on each side is not a kosher sukkah. So that was two of the halachot that we explained in the Mishnah, and the Taz explains what's the reason why he says when you have an open space, open space is more significant. Empty space, people see, it's more recognized. You see something, it looks different, it looks disconnected more, and therefore it's a smaller amount that would invalidate, that would cut the sukkah in half, that would separate it if it's an empty space compared to not kosher schach. In the Gemara, yesterday, we started with Rabbah. Rabbah questioned one of these halachot. Now, first of all, we have another halacha that was stated in the Mishnah. The other halacha that was stated in the Mishnah was that if you have not kosher schach adjacent to the wall, we spoke about airspace adjacent to the wall, where we said airspace, we said is a problem because that will separate the wall from the rest of the sukkah. Because if you have airspace that is open, the open area disconnects the wall from the rest of the schach. But if what's next to the wall is, if it's not kosher schach, we said there's a rule of dofen akuma. We said there's a rule that we look as if the wall moved and comes to the area where the schach is. So that's what the Gemara said. And comes Rabbah, and Rabbah questioned the opinion that says that not kosher schach, if you have not kosher schach 4 tfachim, right? The Gemara brought the Yeshiva and Rav said that 4 tfachim of not kosher schach would cut the sukkah in half, right? If you have a sukkah, meaning if the not kosher schach is adjacent to the wall, so then we say the wall moves, right? We look at that schach, not kosher schach, and the wall, they come together, and it's as if you have the wall is right there. As long as the not kosher schach is not, as long as it doesn't take up more than 4 amot, we could say that the wall will move. If let's say the not kosher schach is 3 amot over here, and the wall is over here, we will look at it as if everything came right over here. But if it's 4 amot or more, we will not say that the wall moves. But that's if you got up to 4 amot by the wall. But in the middle of the sukkah, if it's not near the wall, you have up to 4 tfachim of not kosher schach. If you have 4 tfachim of not kosher schach, even 4 tfachim of not kosher schach will split the sukkah in half. It will make the sukkah in a way that there's like you have 2 different structures. It's not one sukkah anymore, because you have something here that has separated the sukkah. But what's the thing that separates sukkah? It's 4 tfachim of not kosher schach. If it runs across the whole, let's say the sukkah, this is the sukkah, and it runs all across the whole length of the sukkah. Let's say this room is the sukkah, and you have in the ceiling not kosher schach Adam, and it runs all the way from one end, from this wall to over. Make believe there's no wall over here. There's a wall on the right, a wall on the left, and a wall on the back. It splits the 3 walls, and now I only have 2 walls on this side, and I only have 2 walls left on this side because the not kosher schach splits it. That is the opinion of the yeshiva of Rav. Rabbah took issue. Rabbah said that not kosher schach will 4 tfachim, 12 to 16 inches, is not a significant amount to split the sukkah. He holds, good morning, Dr. Rosen, you have to have 4 amot of not kosher schach to split a sukkah. You need 4 amot, which is 7 feet by 7 feet, running across the sukkah. You need 7 feet and 7 feet in the middle of the sukkah to run across in order to split the sukkah in half. If you don't have 7 feet by 7 feet of not kosher, let's say you have 5 feet by 5 feet, which is a nice area that runs all across the ceiling. Let's say by mistake you put metal poles in the middle of the sukkah. You thought you want to, that would be a good idea. You put metal poles, which is not kosher schach. So you can't sit under those metal poles. But the question is, what about the rest of the sukkah, which has kosher schach, and you have a nice area? You have at least 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim of kosher schach. Would you say that this is a sukkah or not? So Rabbah says, as long as the not kosher schach is not 7 feet by 7 feet, even though it goes all across the whole sukkah, it doesn't split the sukkah in half. And you look at the sukkah, that there's still, all the walls are still, we look at that, that's one structure. And if it's one structure, as long as you have kosher schach covering your area of 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim, so that will be kosher. Just you can't sit under that not kosher schach that's such a large amount. That is a lenient opinion, right? That's Rabbah's opinion. That's not the halacha. Okay. So this is going to be the discussion of the Gemara. Is going to focus on Rabbah's challenge to the yeshiva, the rabbis from the yeshiva of Rav. So again, Rabbah's challenge is, Rabbah holds that in order to split a sukkah in half with not kosher schach, you have to have 4 amot of not kosher schach, a much larger amount, 7 feet by 7 feet, not 12 to 16 inches. So now we have the Gemara. We are on Yud Zayin Amar Aleph, 17a3. V'aminu lahu on the bottom first side, the second paragraph. V'aminu lahu ana. And I told them. By the way, just an interesting point. The size, we talk about size 4 tfachim. That is that we say a 4 tfachim of not kosher schach will split a sukkah. That is also the minimal size of a lulav. Minimal size of a lulav is 4 tfachim, which people will say maybe I think they'll go with about 15 inches. 3 tfachim, we said, is between 9 and 12 inches. So a lot of people will say that 11 inches would be enough. What's the size of it? Sometimes they cut that ravot, sometimes a little short. Sometimes you see that ravot, depending on how well they cut that ravot. So the minimum size of an arava has to be 3 tfachim, which is like 11 inches long. So try to get the long, make sure that usually there's hashgacha on them, but that's the halacha. Okay. So v'amina luhu ana, and I told them this is Rabbah's challenge to Rav. He says the following. What was his challenge? He says, "Ma ilu schach pasul, pachot marba." What happens if you have not kosher schach, less than 4 tfachim, and avir pachot mishlosha? And right next to it, you have an airspace of less than 3 tfachim. What would you say about that sukkah? So I got over here in the center of the sukkah. I have 3.5 tfachim. I have about, less than 4 tfachim. Morning, Jake. I have less than 4 tfachim of not kosher schach in the center of the sukkah. And I also have right next to it, I have less than 3 tfachim of empty airspace. So do we join? We know airspace, we're very strict on airspace, because airspace, 3 tfachim of airspace would separate the sukkah, empty space. We're more lenient when it comes to, at least the yeshiva of Rav is saying, when it comes to not kosher schach, you have up to 4 tfachim. 4 tfachim would split the sukkah. But what happens if you have 3.5 not kosher schach. You have, say, 3.5 metal poles running across the sukkah, and right next to 3.5 metal poles, you got 1 tefach of empty space next to it, adjacent to it. So the total of not kosher stuff you have here is really more than 4 tvachim. But in actual not kosher schach, you only have 3.5, and in actual airspace, you have less than 3 tvachim. If they would be in by itself, if you have less than 3 tvachim by itself running across a sukkah, it will not split the sukkah. If you have less than 4 tvachim of not kosher schach, it won't split a sukkah. But what's bothering Rabbah is saying, but we should join the two together. Because airspace, which you look at, it's so strict, that we're so strict about airspace, why don't you join the airspace if it's true what you're saying, that if you have 4 tvachim of not kosher schach, it will split the sukkah? So then airspace, empty airspace that will bring it over 4 tvachim, but provided that they're adjacent to each other, that should take it over the top and make it invalid. And the fact that you hold it doesn't join together is a big question on your opinion. That is the question that Rabbah has on the students from the yeshiva of Rav. That's going to be his question. Look, now we're on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, 17a3. He says, "V'aminu luhana," and I told him, "Ma ilu ika schach pasul pachot me'arba'ah." If you have not kosher schach less than 4 tvachim, ba'avir, an empty space adjacent to it, pachot me'shlosha, less than 3 tvachim, what would you tell me? You would tell me, since I don't have 3 total of empty airspace, I don't have 4 total of not kosher schach, kshira, it's kosher. Now, then, okay, I have 3.5 not kosher schach, and I have 1 empty space next to it. You told me it's fine. It doesn't split the sukkah. Now, what happens now? Maliyah b'shikudim. I went ahead and I took that empty airspace that was next to the 3.5 tvachim of not kosher schach, and I filled that empty airspace with metal, like Simon said. I started with not kosher schach 3. I had less than 4 tvachim. So I had 3.5 tvachim of not kosher schach. No. Then I had less than 3 tvachim of air next to it. What's the halacha? That was the question. That was Rabbah is like, he's setting up his question. How do you set up your question with the question? You say, Rabbi, what do you hold if you have less than 4 tvachim not kosher schach and less next to it, less than 3 tvachim airspace, empty air? It's kosher. Oh, but he's asking you should combine them. But the halacha is that it is fine. The halacha is that less than 3 tvachim empty airspace, we look at it as if it's closed. Lavud. We say that if you have an empty airspace less than 3 tvachim, we look at empty space less than 3 tvachim as if it's closed. Like we had in the Gemara, if you create a wall by putting standing sticks, and there's spaces between the sticks, as long as the space between the sticks are less than 3 tvachim, less than 9-12 inches, we look at the sticks as if they're closed. As if it's a wall, lavud joined together. When you have an empty space less than 3 tvachim, it's joined together. Also. So therefore, if you have an empty space of less than 3 tvachim, and then you have less than 4 not kosher schach, we don't combine them together. We say the less than 3 tvachim empty space is like it's closed, and you're remaining with 3.5 tvachim of not kosher schach. And you have kosher schach, and the rest of the sukkah you have kosher schach. No, but you look, even if you have, let's say you have a wall over here, and the schach doesn't come to the wall, we look at it as if the schach came to the wall. Like there's no kosher on the other side. Here's a wall, here's schach, right? the schach. Now the question is this wall connected to the schach or not? So we would look, technically, you should be able to look at this as if that's technically this, as if it's closed. Now, so Rabba it says the following: Malya b'shipudim. If you took this 3.5 tefach of not kosher schach, and next to it was 1 tefach of empty space, and Malya b'shipudim, and you filled it with metal. Now, if you have 3.5 not kosher schach and you fill the empty airspace of 1 tefach with metal, now you have 4.5 tefachim of not kosher schach, right? Correct? I started with 3.5 not kosher schach. Jason to it, I had empty space. You tell me it's good. Then you tell me, but if you fill that empty space with what? With metal poles. So now we have a total of more than 4 tefachim of not kosher schach. Good morning, Dr. Moshe. It's gone over the top, right? Good morning. That's what you told me. So he says, Moya b'shipudim, if you went ahead and you filled it with these metal poles, what would be the halacha? Sula, it would be invalid. So comes Rabbah and he says, V'lo yehei avir haposel b'shlosha, the airspace that invalidates with 3, kischach pasul haposa barba. It shouldn't be less strict than schach, invalid schach. Meaning since airspace is stronger than not kosher schach, so we should say that if you have airspace of a tefach next to the not kosher schach, if you would fill the airspace with not kosher schach, it would join to go over the top. Now you have 4 tefachim. So even if you don't fill the airspace with not kosher schach, airspace itself is much more, it's more significant to ruin than schach, than not kosher schach. With 3 tefachim, right? Say it again. Right, that's right. But he's asking if it's such a disqualifier, so you should join it together with the not kosher schach. And the fact that you don't join it together not kosher schach, he says that's a problem in your. It has to be that in order to split a sukkah in half, it has to be 4 amot, 7 by 7 amot of not kosher schach going across the whole sukkah to split the structure into 2. That's what Rabbah is suggesting. So the rabbis said back to him, Ihachi, according to your opinion, that you say you need 4 amot of not kosher schach to run across the whole sukkah to split the sukkah in half. The didach nami the amrit schach posa barba amot. Ma ilus iga schach posa pocha barba amot. What would be the halacha according to you, Rabbah? If you have we're going across this whole sukkah. Here's the sukkah. Wall on the right, wall on the left, wall in the back, no wall here, 3-wall sukkah. You have metal of less than 4 amot, 3.5 amot of metal running across the whole sukkah. What would you say? Would that split the sukkah into 2 structures? And now I'm only left with 2 walls on this side and 2 walls on this side, right? That part of the wall and this wall, that part of the wall and this wall. Would it split it if it's 3.5 amot? Rabbi says no. 3.5 amot of not kosher schach does not split this sukkah into 2. And you wouldn't be able to sit underneath the not kosher schach, but you would be able to sit under the kosher schach because you look at it that you still have a sukkah, you still have 3 walls. We don't look at this as 2 different structures. And as long as the kosher schach is a total area of 7 tefachim by 7 tefachim, you're good. Now, if we would say it splits the sukkah in half, so then I'm only left with that. If I split this in half, I'm only left with half of the back wall and the right wall, and half of the left wall, that back wall, and this wall. If it splits in half, I only have 2 walls left on each side. You understand that? If we start with 3 walls and this not kosher schach is enough to split the sukkah in half, I'm only left with like an L on each side. An L on each side is only 2 walls. So he says, what's the halacha according to you? If you have schach pasul pochas ma'arba, less than 4 amot of not kosher schach, and next to that, you have empty space. I have not kosher here center going all across this sukkah. I have not kosher metal, 3.5 tefachim metal, and next to that, here's 3.5 tefachim metal. I have empty space, nothing, of 1 tefach. Not 1 tefach. One. Let's say I started with 3 amot, and let's say an amma has 6 tefachim. Okay, an amma is 6 tefachim. So I had, let's say I had a little less. I had 4 amot minus a tefach. 4 amot minus a tefach. Or I had running 4 amot minus a tefach going across the sukkah. So you say that doesn't split the sukkah in half. Then next to that 4 amot minus a tefach, I had 1 tefach of empty space. So now the total of the 4 amot less a tefach with this tefach of empty space, I've gotten 4 amot total now. 4 amot less a tefach of not kosher schach, and now a tefach of empty space. So the total is 4 amot. What would you say? Would you join the 2? No, you don't join the 2. You will not say that it joins together. So you would say, you would say it's kosher. Now, what would you rather say if you filled that empty space, that empty tefach? Again, you had 4 amot minus a tefach, not kosher schach, running across the sukkah. 1 tefach, empty space. Now, you told me it's kosher. But if you filled that empty space with metal, so now you have a total of 4 amot of not kosher schach, right? Because you had originally 4 amot minus a tefach in the middle, not kosher schach. And now you fill the empty space with a tefach of kosher schach. You have 4 amot. You tell me, my psula. If that's the case, lo ye'avir posa b'shlosha k'schach pasul posa b'arba amot. Avir, empty space, which is so significant, which could invalidate the 3 tefachim. How can it not be? It should have at least the same ability like schach pasul. If schach pasul, you should consider if you should be able to join this tefach of avir, which is so much more strict than not kosher schach, because you need not kosher schach, you need 4 amot of not kosher schach. And when it comes to space, you need 3 tefachim. So you should definitely join a space of 1 tefach to the 3.5, the 4 amot minus a tefach. Vamina luana. So Rabbi says, and how did I answer? I answered their question. I said, meaning the question that I had on you is not a question on me. Why is the question on you not a question on me? Because I said, you can't compare the 2. Why not? According to me, that mina abba amot mishum shi'uru v'lav shi'uruhu. We now turn the page. Right now, 17b1. When I say the shir abba amot to disqualify a sukkah, to cut the sukkah in half, that it has the power that you need 4 amot of not kosher schach to cut a sukkah in half, is because mishum shi'uru v'lav shi'uru. That I understand. That's the halacha. That I understand is a tradition from halacha Moshe Sinai. The 4 amot. You need 4 amot, 7 feet by 7 feet wide of not kosher schach, running across the whole sukkah to split in half. And I also understand that there's a halacha Moshe Sinai that to split a sukkah with empty space is a different share. It's a different amount. One is an amount of 4 amot, and one is an amount of 3 tvachim. So, high lav shiuru, and when you have less than 4 amot, when you have less than 4 amot of not kosher schach, you didn't meet the shear. You didn't meet the size. To invalidate, because you need to meet, there's a certain size that's required for empty space, and there's a certain size that's required for not kosher schach. And one, one has nothing to do with the other. It's a different size. So, like you say, there's a different size for the lulav, and there's a different size for hadassim. A lulav is 4 tvachim, minimum size. Hadassim is 3 tvachim. One thing has nothing to do with each one. They have their own rules. But one has nothing to do with the other. They don't join together. High lav shiuru. Kivan de lo shavi shuril hadadi, since they are not equal shurim, the lo mitzdarfi, since they each one has its own size, so they don't join together. El ditchu, but according to you, damritu shir misham aflaga, you're saying why do you say 3 tvachim is considered the amount of empty space that invalidates a sukkah? What's the idea of 4 tvachim of not kosher schach? That's because you say that creates a separation. When you have an empty space of air, it creates a certain separation, and 4 tvachim creates another separation. Well, so therefore, because of that, what's if it's a question of separating the space, this from the wall? So they're both working with the idea of creating separation. Except you just say that it takes more to separate an empty space, separates more than actual not kosher schach. But it's all about separating. So it's all about separating, creating a disconnect. So you have 2 items that are separating. You have the empty space that's separating, and you have the not kosher schach that's separating from the wall. So you should connect both together. We'll have to see more next time to elaborate more on this point. Okay, we want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat. We're back on Monday, everybody.